The start of the new league year is here, and the Broncos didn't waste any time revamping the roster in free agency. Hello, welcome into the studio. I'm Phil Milani, alongside Sidney Jones and Eric Dalala. Guys, this team is a lot tougher now. Added some big guys up front. Let's start with the offensive line. Sidney, what do you think about the moves they've made there?
Yeah, Phil, I think it's great. You know, George Paton said they needed to upgrade the offensive line, and that's exactly what they did. They got two of the best offensive linemen on the market, left guard Ben Powers and right tackle Mike McGlinchey. Phil, starting with Ben Powers, he started 36 games in the past 4 years with the Ravens. He's been a full-time starter the past 2 seasons and really had a breakout year last year. And then if you look at Mike McGlinchey, he's a former first-round pick, started all 69 games that he appeared in since he entered the league, and, a really great solution to the right tackle situation that has been here with the Broncos the past several years. And if you look at both of them, I mean, both Powers and McGlinchey are good, great run blockers, two veterans that can provide stability on the offensive line, something that this offensive line really needs.
Yeah, I mean, Russell Wilson was sacked 55 times last year, tied for the most in the league. You knew that they had to do something about the offensive line. Sean Payton did that same thing in New Orleans when he got there in 2006. Eric, what do you think? How has Sean Payton put his stamp already on this Broncos roster?
Yeah, Phil, I mean, one, it's just the sheer number of moves, right? 9 players have agreed to terms with the Broncos. That shows you, and granted, some of that's because the Broncos don't have as many draft picks, so they needed to go out and make moves in free agency. They needed to be aggressive, but when you have that much turnover so quickly here, the very start of the league year, and you've already got 9 moves to talk about, that shows that he's going and he's picking players that are in his likeness. And based on what we know about the Saints and his time there, you're talking about tough football players. And so, Sidney talked about McGlinchey and Powers. I think of Chris Manhertz, the tight end, that's also going to be able to help in the run game. You think about Zach Allen on the defensive line. You're Samaje Perine at running back. You're talking about tough football players. And, we've got to see how it plays out on the field. But obviously, he's started to shape this roster the way he wants it to look.
And those moves on the offensive line, they're not just going to protect Russell Wilson in pass pro, but also the running game should be a lot better. The Broncos 21st last year there. You expect that to improve with Sean Payton here now in Denver, too. Eric, let's stay with you. You mentioned Zach Allen coming in. Draymond Jones leaves. He's heading to Seattle. What do you think about his replacement coming in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Zach Allen is a guy who has familiarity with Vance Joseph. He spent 4 years there in Arizona with Vance, so maybe a guy that fits his scheme a little bit better. Also just a really good football player, 9.5 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, 34 quarterback hits just over the last 2 seasons. He's really come into his own. Again, a tough football player, former college teammate of Justin Simmons there at Boston College, so has some familiarity. But you talk about those two guys being compared to each other. Here's just one stat. Phil, you like the advanced statistics here.
Get into it.
Among interior defensive linemen last season, Allen was 5th in hit and sack rate. So every 20 snaps, he either had a hit or a quarterback sack was affecting the opposing signal caller. Draymond Jones in that same category was 33rd. And so I'm not saying that category is the end-all, be-all. Obviously, there's different numbers you can look at, but just in that category shows the discrepancy there, shows you how often Zach Allen is making an impact on the game.
And it really seems like there in Arizona, J.J. Watt, future Hall of Famer, took him under his wing, really sang his praises, especially on social media. So Zach Allen, maybe you could call him an ascending player on his way to Denver. Sidney, one guy we haven't talked about is Jarrett Stidham, going to come in here and back up Russell Wilson. What do you think about him coming to Denver?
Yeah, I mean, he was the Broncos, second move of free agency. They wasted no time going to identify, their backup quarterback. And, Jarrett Stidham, he finished the season for the Raiders after the team decided to move on from Derek Carr. And, he started those final 2 games. And within those 2 games, he threw for 584 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, had a quarterback rating of 108.1 versus the 49ers. And, those 2 final games were versus the 49ers and the Chiefs, 2 really, really talented teams. So, I like this option behind Russell.
Yeah, and he also showed off his legs a little bit mobile, and a guy with a lot of potential coming in here. Certainly if Russell Wilson goes down, you need Jarrett Stidham to come in and play a little bit. I think the Broncos can rely upon a guy like that. Sidney, what do you think just overall? This team is better today than they were last week.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Broncos opened up free agency with a bang. I mean, we already mentioned the 2 offensive linemen they got, really trying to protect Russ out there. Eric already mentioned a few guys, but they got depth at tight end, running back, cornerback. I mean, they added a lot of talent to this roster, and I'm excited to see what, General Manager George Paton and head coach Sean Payton do the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, mentioned the 5 draft picks that they have coming up here. Eric, what do you think? Any more moves? This first wave has sort of come. You think the Broncos are done?
No, I mean, it's hard to rule anything out, right? The way that they've been so aggressive here at the start of free agency. Obviously, there's some different position groups across the roster that you could look at and say, maybe the Broncos need a little bit more help. Who knows if that comes right away, if they're going to let the market settle a little bit now and then take a look. You can always go back and revisit in the days leading up to the draft and the days after the draft, when the Broncos do have those 5 picks right now. Certainly in some fashion or another, the Broncos are not done adding to this roster. This is not a final version of what this team is going to look like, but it's a really good start.
Yeah, they definitely addressed some areas of need, got some talent in here, and it'll be excited to get them in Denver, meet them, and see what the personality of this team is going to start to look like. But some veteran talent in some positions of need coming to Denver. That's going to do it for us. For Eric Dalala and Sidney Jones, I'm Phil Milani.